All right, so chapter 14 is a very good sum up, actually, of what we've, from 1 to 14, from 1 to 13. It sums up everything that we know, and it reviews it a bit, and also, obviously, we come at it from another layer of understanding. And it's actually like a nice bookmark as well in the study. So, what do we know at this point? We know that there's Tzaddik, Rasha, and Beinoni. And let's talk, how do we identify? So there's the Tzaddik. The Tzaddik is the one, and so we have two souls, remember? So let's review that too. Chapter 1 already introduces us. It's the first thing that we have this new paradigm, that we have two souls. We have a godly soul, and we have an animal soul. Sorry, we need to lower the AC. So, yeah, sorry about that. It's like every time I start talking and then I'm like, I'm talking. Yeah. So, you experience it. So we have the godly soul, right? And that is that's a piece of God. All it wants is to not have a self. It has the opposite drive than the animal soul, which isn't bad. It's not looking to hurt anybody. It just wants to exist for itself, and it wants to experience itself and enhance and pleasure and self-fulfillment, even spirit. We're going to talk about that. Even spiritual self-fulfillment can be driven by the animal soul just because it's for self. So it's self-focused or selfless and service-focused. That's really the difference between them. And the tzaddik is somebody who has, they're completely driven by their godly soul. So the godly soul's fully motivated and driven by godly desires. They have no desire for any like materialism, ego. They have none of it. And their actions reflect that. So they're like through and through, in and out. The Rasha has struggle. They have both. They have godly soul and they have animal soul, and there's like this tug of war between them. They definitely have animal soul in them. It's like totally their vocal part of life. What is the Beinoni? The Beinoni is somebody who is able to manage the godly soul's the animal soul's impulses so 100% that he's only making choices from his godly soul's voice. So he has two voices. It says the animal soul desire and the godly soul drive, both of them, and he's only channeling the godly soul's drive. He's only giving clothes. In chapter 4, we talk about clothing. He's only giving clothing to the godly soul's desire. So their actions are only mitzvahs, and their thoughts are only holy thoughts that they're pondering on, and their speech is only productive, kind, godly, elevated speech. All of it. So from the outside, this is review, from the outside, the godly soul, the Beinoni and the tzaddik look the same. But it's what's going on inside where they're completely different. With what's going on inside, the Beinoni is actually similar to the Rasha, as an extreme evil, but we like to call him a Rasha because there's really no parallel translation for the Rasha that most people fall in the category. And that's how we started. Where do we identify? How do I identify? Am I a tzaddik? Clearly not, because I know that I have an ego. Am I a Beinoni? Well, no, because I act on my ego. Maybe not all the time, but sometimes. So I guess that makes me a Rasha.
No, but the last class you say Beinoni is struggling between the ego and the
Neshama.
Yeah. So you are a Beinoni. Most of us are a Beinoni.
We can be a Beinoni. And the Beinoni is And that's exactly what the Tanya, I love the way you bring us through the Tanya chapters. And that is exactly where we're going to open up with this Tanya. So until now, we've talked about the Beinoni being 100% impulse control, 100% perfect actions, perfect speech, all the time. Now, I can tell you, speak for myself, that's not me. I am not perfect in my actions. Something bothers me, and most of the time, I'm going to impulsively yell or say something kind of obnoxious. People who work with me know that. Yes.
Impulse, right?
But the question is, do we say it?
But to put yourself in a category of Rasha, that is too much. Like, I mean, we know what is Rasha, right?
So there's two types of Rashas. In chapter 1 actually talks about this more. But there's the Rasha V'Tovlo and Rasha V'Ralo. Rasha V'Ralo is a sociopath. Right? That's the one we know we're not. That's the Rasha V'Ralo. There's only bad in him. He only experiences his bad. He's only motivated by very base, low drive, and he doesn't have much regret either, because of that he's fed into it so much that it's such a big energy. He does have a little bit of godly soul, like kind of hovering, waiting for an opportunity to like knock, knock, knock. And some people in their lifetimes do get the knock, knock. Even the Rasha V'Ralo, even people who are very, very low space can get a knock, knock from their neshama, and there's hope for them too. But most of us are not in that category. Most of us are in the Rasha V'Tovlo category, that they are perfect, which means there's good in them that has a varying degrees of strength in their voice. There can be a weaker voice, a stronger voice. It could be such a strong voice that all it is just a little imperfect. But they're still in the Rasha category. And that's why I don't like to translate this category into really anything, because there is no way to explain somebody. Basically, the one word I can think of is imperfect. Just the imperfect person. That's it.
Can you define the two terms that the Hebrew that you just said, Rashava and Rashava?
Rasha V'Ralo is Rasha who has bad in him. Ra means bad. Rasha V'Tovlo, like Boker Tov, good morning. He's the Rasha who has good in him. So Rasha V'Ralo, like bad, 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 not us. Rasha V'Tovlo is basically imperfect person. So I don't like calling him evil, because even though technically we talked about the energy of imperfection and how it is aligned with the other side, that's why he's called Rasha. Because if you were binary about the world, good and the opposite of good, anything that's self-focused is the opposite of good and therefore evil, but not that type of evil that we associate as evil. Thank you for asking that.
You could almost say without a conscience.
Well, that would be the Rasha V'Ralo.
Yes.
The conscience is our godly soul.
Yes.
And that's that struggle that we
neshama.
have on a daily basis. We have the conscience, we have the drive, we have the impulse, and then we have the conscience. We have the impulse, and we have the higher, the higher self talking to the other part of ourselves. We have different parts, right? That's in psychology. That's our two different souls. The tzaddik doesn't have parts. They don't have an animal soul. They are two types of tzaddiks too. There's the tzaddik that's completely transformed their animal soul to be another godly soul, literally just like another, they're all on the same team. And then there's the imperfect tzaddik, which has made their animal soul dormant, like a dead virus in a vaccine. Like no voice. It's never going to become alive. It's not like I said this is an example I used last week. It's not like terrible, nobody should ever have like viruses like what are they called again? Like mono or things like that go sleepy and then they have remission and then they wake up. Like that would be more of a Rasha, a Beinoni experience, that they have the voice, but sometimes it's quieter, sometimes it's louder. The tzaddik is dead vaccine. Like there's no waking up from that virus.
Can you keep that dormant? Can you argue that that's not possible to keep that dormant? Like
correct.
It will inevitably
correct.
rejuvenate.
That's where we're going in this conversation. That it isn't like you have Rasha, then you graduate to Beinoni, and then you graduate to tzaddik. There's actually two different paths. The path of the tzaddik and the path of the Beinoni.
So I have a question about that. does the soul choose before we come here if to take the path of a tzaddik or path of a Benoni?
Oh my God, you're so on point. Hold the thought because we're going to come back to
That's
it.
what I wanted to ask last week. Can you tell me all this?
Okay, no, thank you. So, but we are going to come back to that, okay? I promise, because it's literally in the chapter. So, but more talking about the two different paths at this point. Well, actually, let's go there. So, when a child is born, they're born with either a soul that can reach Beinoni or a soul that can reach Tzaddik. And the type of challenges that they have from a young age are going to reflect that. So at Tzaddik, maybe, they're born with a different nature. And there's stories of one of the Chabad Rebbe's that there was, when the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, was born, his mother was given instructions by his teacher how to raise him, because he says, you have a special soul. And there was, it was like, I'm getting chills, but he was a tzaddik. This is, the tzaddik wrote the Tanya, this guide for us. Most of us are Beinonis, but he himself, the Alter Rebbe, was a tzaddik, and he didn't have a normal childhood. He didn't have the normal things that come up for children. Yes, he was a child, but his type of childhood wasn't the same type of experience that most children go through. There was a story about him and his another child, and one of them pushed the other one into a pit in jest, and they were arguing who was taller. And I'm so bad at stories, but I think it was I don't want to have it on the recording, but there was his friend, and he pushed the other kid into the pit and says, "See, look, I'm taller." And I think it was the Alter Rebbe, but I could be wrong. It was a tzaddik, a child that was becoming a tzaddik, and he said, "No, I'm going to get a chair and stand on the chair." He said, "You see, when you want to be taller, don't push someone else down. Stand yourself up higher." This is how they played. There's other stories of the play of the tzaddiks when they're young, and how their play it was play. They were children, but it was different level play. They would play like they would become, another story is a child, he was crying to his father and said, "How come God doesn't appear to me the way he appeared to Abraham?" They were learning the portion of the week of Abraham and the guests, the angels coming to the tent and the guests. And he's crying bitter tears of a child. "Why doesn't God appear to me the way he appears to Abraham?" This is a childhood of a tzaddik. So you see, it's a childhood, but not a normal path. The rest of us, most of us are crying because we have a skinned knee or because they got more ice cream. Like, that's normal childhood. And that's okay, that's normal. That's the path of the Beinoni. When I say hold the thought, we're going to come back to how that's not the end of the story. Okay, there is more to, it's like a glass ceiling, but there's more to it. Okay?
So where does the Rasha fit into the two paths?
The Rasha is how we're born.
Okay.
We're born with a struggle. We're born with a very loud impulse. In fact, actually, we're taught that the animal soul is what enters the body first, before the godly soul. Otherwise, if the godly soul were to enter first, the animal soul wouldn't have a chance. Because it's just so much, it has the Yitzhak, from we learned 2 weeks ago and last week, that there is the advantage of light over darkness, of the wisdom over folly. If that came into us first, if that just rationale, godly soul came into us first, it would just take over before any other impulse had a chance. So we're born with survival instincts. That's how it looks in a baby, right? They're just crying. It's not bad. They need to survive. That's the animal soul's embodiment. Animalistic, just to be a person in this world. We need that. Our work is that we channel that. Gosh, we're going to be learning this for the entire book. There's so many layers.
Now, last week you say that the Benoni has his own path and the tzaddik has his own path, and it can never mix, right? But the Rasha.
Today we're going to learn about how it mixes.
All right, I want to know. if
Yeah,
he
we're
can
going to get
mix
there.
down to a
It comes at the
Benoni
end,
or
though, so you have to be
stay
patient.
forever? All right.
So before we do that, today's chapter, actually on the first page, what are we learning today? The objective of this week's chapter, the theme, is in the first page's highlight. Now, the rank of the Beinoni is one that is attainable by every man. Each person should strive after it, for every person can, at any time or hour, be a Beinoni. So, we've been talking about this Beinoni in the true fact that they are perfect in action, which I was starting to say earlier. That's not me. Like, I lash out and then I feel so bad after, blah, blah, blah. But I'm not perfect. If I were to be perfect, I would feel the feelings and then I would be completely in control with my words. Right? That's a Beinoni. And I can do that sometimes, but not all the time. A Beinoni is all the time. They can't even imagine lashing out. They feel triggered because they're not a tzaddik, because they feel the feelings, but they're never going to lash out. It's not going to happen for them. They can't even imagine it. It's like it crosses the line for them.
The impulse control line. Right.
To not have impulse control, every part of that at any way crosses their line. They have the impulses, but they never act on it. Now we're going to talk about how we can access that experience every time we have impulse control. And we foreshadowed this. We did mention this before. But now we're going to go into the process. It's almost like a meditation that Tanya takes us through to get us into the space where we can be a Beinoni for right now. So, what is this meditation? Let's ask, why is it that we don't have impulse control when we don't? What is that?
You got triggered and you have stress and your fight, flight, freeze takes over your animal
amygdala.
part of your brain, your amygdala.
Yeah, brainstem takes over, and we make a choice, a micro choice at that moment to go with it, right? And what allows us, if we were to just take space, right? That's in psychology too. If we just take a breath and allow our prefrontal cortex, where the godly soul kind of hangs out, to voice itself, then we would be able to make a choice from that space more easily. But why would we? Is there any advantage that the prefrontal cortex, the godly soul, it's not exactly the same, by the way, but for this conversation, has over the impulse of the animal soul?
Yeah, you become aware of what you're feeling.
But why? Are they equal? Like, maybe one day I'll choose, chocolate ice cream, and one day I'll choose vanilla ice cream. Like, are they equal? Like, is it one day animal soul, one day godly soul? Like, well, they both have a voice, so.
Maybe they vary in strength, right? So maybe in a situation like that, you are becoming more empathetic in certain moments, not only thinking about yourself, but others as well. So how your current decision will impact future
right.
children, husbands, whatever that might be.
So what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that there is an inherent advantage, or so distracted. Can you help Rahul close the door? There is an inherent betterness that the godly soul's impulse has, that we kind of accept to be true. It isn't just like sometimes it's equal. Like, I'm in the mood of this today, I'm in the mood of that today, and what makes anyone better? We kind of accept that there is an advantage over that our prefrontal cortex, or our godly soul, has over our more selfish animal soul drive. We would like to be more that way. We kind of all agree that we would like to be more selfless. There's something better about being selfless. There's something that is an ideal for us. And that is what we talked about last week, which is the light. The light has an advantage over darkness, right? We agree that there's something better about light than darkness. There's something better about being selfless than selfish. So we agree that to be true. Okay, so we're going through stages of meditation, all right? So we all agree it's better to be selfless. So then why are we ever selfish? Like you said, we're not practiced. But there's another reason. And let's now take this conversation further. Let's talk about this from a Torah and mitzvah perspective. It's very true. Selfish and selfless is the same exact process. Now let's take the process to a different content. Let's say we're talking about a mitzvah, and let's say stealing, for example. Stealing is a sin, according to the Torah. And also common sense, but according to the Torah, which makes it an easy example. We agree that stealing is not something to be proud of, right? That's more like the darkness. It's better to control ourselves and not steal the Prada bag, whatever it is. No, it's probably better.
I'm glad you went something worth stealing,
Right.
not a candy or
No.
something.
Yeah, we're more sophisticated than that. So, but why would somebody steal? And again, you can take this very extreme example and apply it to anything, right? Why would we lash out? Why would we eat something non-kosher? Why? Why would we do that if we know the truth is there's something elevated? We want to be connected to God. We want to do His commandments. There's something about doing His commandments that we know is better. We know it's good to be connected to God. So why would we ever not?
What about extreme cases when you try to do it to survive? Does that count? For example, stealing.
Mm-hmm.
If a child steals food because he's hungry.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if adults steal food because he's hungry. Okay, he's more aware.
It's
So,
built into the Torah that survival comes first for most things.
okay.
But you're bringing us to the next thing, that there is 3 mitzvot in the Torah that we're taught, only 3 from 613, that it's die before do them.
Okay.
And the main one is worshiping idols. So that's why throughout our history, this is the next thing we're going to read. Throughout our history, we have had many, many heroes of our past that have been told, convert or die. Like the era of the Crusades was a famous time that they went through Europe on their way to the Holy Land, and there was like a bloodbath. They just would storm into the city and put the cross in front of people and say, bow down to the cross or accept Christianity or die or we kill you. And the vast majority of people chose death. And the vast majority of people weren't Torah scholars. They were simple people that did not have access to study. They didn't have access to higher order thinking. They were just living life. Some of them didn't even practice Judaism. And yet, when faced with this choice, die or convert, die or really, or renounce your Judaism, they chose to die. And it happened also with the Muslims, the Almohads in Spain. I don't know if you know the story. It's a little lesser known. They also did the exact same thing. They went through Spain and they said, Islam or die. Unfortunately, many times in Russia with the Cossacks, it happened throughout our history. And why do the majority of Jewish people choose death? Why is that? What's going on? They choose. Judaism wasn't a priority for them until then. Your son had it with the story that you shared with us last week. It was like, do I stand up for my Judaism? There's no choice. It's obvious.
Apparently.
When you're faced with that, all of a sudden, so what is happening? There's something that wakes up inside of our soul, and it triggers an extra awareness, a soul awareness, that it becomes very black and white. And when it's that black and white, getting chills. When it's that black and white, the choice is clear, because at the truth of the matter, nobody, no Jew, wants to disconnect from God. Nobody wants that. When it's that clear, when it's disconnect from God, and live, or connect with God and die, it's not even, I'm not going to say hard or easy, but it's very, very clear. It is the only choice for the majority of people in our history, and God should help us that none of us ever experience even anything like that. But our history is what I'm going on, the track record. This is what happens. So if that's the case, if when it's so black and white, it's so clear, then why is it so gray to live as a Jew all the time? And the answer is, we're going to read it. So before we get there, let's read the next page where it says, because under no circumstances. Because the truth is, right, under no circumstances do I want to be parted and severed, and heaven forbid, from the one God, as it is written, your iniquities separate. So the truth is that iniquities are sins. The fact is that they do separate us from God. That's what happens. It's like when we eat sugar, there is an effect that happens to our body, whether we like it or not. There's no meditation that's going to take us out of that, right? The fact is that sins are a separation between us and God, the same way the mitzvot that God commanded us are called mitzvot from the language of connection. They're connection points. There are 613 avenues of connection. On the flip side, when we do the opposite of God's will, it affects our relationship. The same way when you have a relationship between people, when you do things for one another, you create stronger avenues of connection. When you betray trust, or when you do something you know the partner really, really hates, then you might not get divorced from it, but it will affect your relationship. It'll affect your connection more and more over time. More afraid, more afraid, more afraid. But the fact is, it is affecting our relationship, even if it's just a little bit. So maybe when this is black and white, it's like cut off or not, and then you're clear, like, no, I'm not cutting off. No way, that's not what I want. So what happens in that gray area? And that's our next page. We get this this experience of denial. We experience denial and a little bit of delusion. We tell ourselves, it's not going to affect you. It's like when we eat that sugar and we say, we want to be healthy, or we want to even like, I want to lose weight, right? So you're like, okay, I'm going to lose weight. And then when it comes down to it, you're at the meal and you're just like, it's not going to affect my weight. Come on. Like, I can handle this. It's a little bit of delusion. I want to be healthy. I want to be good with my blood sugar. And then, like, you make this big plan. I'm going to be good with my blood sugar. And then there's this thing, it's going to be fine. It's this denial. Like, we're going to be fine. It's not going to affect. And it's like when I'm saying it out loud, it sounds so delusional. But the truth is, that's literally what I experience all the time, right? It's called a ruach shtus. Have you ever heard of the word shtus? It's Yiddish. Shtus. It's shtu. It means nonsense. Shtut. No, I just said it in a Yiddish accent because it's one of the Yiddish words, like nash or whatever. You might have heard shtus, like, oh, that's shtus. Nonsense. If you want to say, like, oh, nonsense.
And in Hebrew it's
shtut. So we get this nonsense inside of us, this, like, denial that we can do what we want, we can do animal soul stuff, and it's not going to affect our relationship with God. But when the fact is, of course it will. That's the fact. It will. But we're not plugged into that. That's how it happens. And then when we have this, when people have this black and white experience, they can't unsee it. It's black and white before them.
And if it's also not reinforced by external circumstances, so if you steal the Prada bag and nothing happens and you get away with it, you think, oh.
It feeds into the nonsense.
It feeds into it.
For sure.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yeah. But if it's but when it becomes crossing the line of something somebody would never do, sometimes they're faced with the truth of their actions. And that would be that black and white experience that, no, that's not me. That's not me. And that brings us to our next thing. Who do we identify as? Do we identify as a body with a soul or a soul in a body? Mm-hmm. So when we are faced with, do we identify as a soul or a body? It's like with this black and white experience, it's like, of course I'm a soul. I'm never going to deny that. Don't take that away from me. Don't take my Judaism away. As soon as somebody insults our Judaism, as if anybody ever questions our connection to Judaism are, whoa, no way, don't even go there, right? Because it's black and white for us. Like, this is who I identify as. I'm a soul. But when it's not that black and white, we start to act, it's not, Judaism is not a priority in day-to-day life because we're not plugged into the fact that we're choosing an identification at that moment. It's more gray. So we just kind of live in a denial space. So the reason why we're going through this thought process is does a Beinoni access Beinoni? How can we access Beinoni at any moment? We plug into the reality. That's how we do it. We say, oh, this is not who I am. Even though it seems not as important. It's not, but does it align with who I am as a soul and a body? If I were to, if my truth is that I want to be aligned with this, then let me apply that truth now. So when we align ourselves that way and we kind of get out of the denial space, that's how we motivate ourselves to choose in that moment. And when we choose in that moment, we are abandoning in that moment. So to bring it back to my original example, if I get triggered and this is not who I'm not that person, that I'm somebody who can manage my feelings, then I can, not in denial. They'll love me anyways, or all the denial stuff that we tell ourselves. I can handle it. I had a hard day. Whatever it is, that the denial talk that gives us license or gives us free pass. No free passes. This is not who I am. That's how we get to a Beinoni moment. The other part of it is that we're not expecting ourselves to be a tzaddik. We're not expecting ourselves to not have the triggers. That's another reason why it's so accessible, because we are accepting that our experience is to be triggered, and our experience is to have a tendency to want to go into denial because we have that part of us that just wants to relax and have it just not work so hard, because it's so much work to choose godly soul. So we just live my life, right? That voice is a survival voice sometimes. It depends what live your life means to you. But if it means I do not want to do the work, then it's not something we have to feel bad that we experience. We don't have to judge ourselves, like we said last week. We don't have to judge ourselves that we have the desire to just not work so hard. We don't have to judge ourselves for the desire, for the triggers that we're experiencing, that something bothered us, that triggered our ego. We don't have to worry about that. That's normal. All we need to do is align with who we want, what we want to express. How do we want to identify? Do we want to identify with the godly soul in us or the animal soul in us? That's how we access Beinoni moments. But I told you there's more. And like Liat said, does that mean that Beinoni is the highest space we can go and that's it, glass ceiling? The answer is no. We can do more than that even. And that introduces us to the paradox that Diane and I discussed the other day. The paradox in Judaism, that is, you'll never get there, but go there anyways. And it happens with understanding God, actually. It's a theme that comes throughout Judaism. God is infinite, right? God has no end. He's omniscient. He knows everything. He's omnipresent. He's in every place at any time. Is it possible for our brains to comprehend that idea of infinity? No. Yet, the Rambam Maimonides tells us that we're commanded to know God. Know God. Know the unknowable. Right? So that's the paradox of Judaism. In this case, we're commanded to reach for the unreachable. Beinoni is reachable. Beinoni is within our within our ability. We can access it any moment. Tzaddik, past the glass ceiling. We can see it. We learned about what it is in chapter 9 and 10, and I think 11. So we know what it is so that we know how to strive for it. We know what we want. We know what we're going for. Will we ever get there? Well, we can get it as a gift. So this is how that works. What is the difference between a tzaddik and a Beinoni? Again, the Beinoni has impulse, the tzaddik doesn't. All the tzaddik wants is God. Their delight is God. And on the flip side, they have no interest for anything materialistic. In fact, they're disgusted by materialism. It's so, like, they have no connection to it. There's not so irrelevant to them. They have no, I'm looking for a word. There's no, they have no, like,
Vain?
I'm looking for a word. They don't have
Need?
a need. They don't even have like no desire, but like they don't even have I relate. Like when you say I relate to that, they don't relate to it. They don't have any connection. They don't have an understanding of it. They don't get why people would like that. It's so not relevant to them that they discussed it. They discussed materialism. They look at it, they say, I wouldn't want that. In fact, they look at food, it's almost like a video game. Like they don't look, it's like they're wearing VR glasses, except the VR is not virtual, it's their access to the real. The hidden sparks of godliness that's in everything. They see food, they see mitzvah juice. Like they don't see it tastes good, it's gonna make me full. They don't see that. They're not connected to materialism at all. That's not the Beinoni's life. That's not like within our ability, within our, I don't know what the word is, but like our natural, our range. That's the word I'm looking for. It's not in our natural range. It's a little out of range, a lot out of range. But we can still kind of aim for that direction. It's almost like when you're driving, and when I learned how to drive, my mom taught me, look ahead, right? When you look ahead, you will naturally stay within the lane, right? So look ahead, look towards the tzaddik, and it will help you get to Beinoni. So this is how we do it, and then I'll tell you how we can get that gift. So we meditate we set aside a few minutes because we cannot expect ourselves to be like this all the time. We're Beinonis, we have animal soul voice. But for a few minutes a day, we meditate, and we meditate on both sides, on the love of God, delighting in God, and we also plug into the transience of materialism. We try to lessen the appeal a little bit. And like I said, few minutes a day, right? To kind of try and experience a bit of tzaddik-like tendencies. So instead of we take a few minutes a day to say, you know what, it isn't all that hot. It's not all that hot. It lasts a minute. It's 1 minute of pleasure, a minute of gratification, and then it's over. And then what does it end up? It ends up making me feel bad or low or whatever it is. We try to maximize the of materialism, kind of like the way the tzaddik experiences it naturally. And we want to maximize the of godliness that the tzaddik experiences naturally. And we do that through set times for meditation. And the gift comes that and this is a Kabbalistic idea, work from below creates gifts from above. And then there's the opposite at times, that we get a gift of inspiration from above that inspires work from below. So there's both. In this case, we're working from below. We do a little meditation, and we really try to get to that space. And not guaranteed, but one could receive a gift of a tzaddik, to reach a tzaddik experience, to actually reach what it actually feels like. And we can actually get to that, even as Beinoni souls. and bringing that home. What that does is that it moves the line. Remember we said that everybody has a line they won't cross, right? For some it's here, for some it's here, for some it's in this area, for some it's in that area, and that's just like, we're not crossing that line. Like, I don't care how tempted I am, I won't do that thing. That's how we move the line further and further. Because as it says in the last page highlight, habit reigns supreme in all matters, and it becomes second nature. So what happens is, when we do something enough, when we train our minds to look at something a certain way for enough time, it starts to become second nature. So we start to train ourselves to see that item of our desire to be a little bit less appealing, and now it doesn't really tempt us anymore. And we have that with matters that aren't spiritual. We can have that idea when it comes to things in diet. Again, that's an easy example. Candy used to really appeal to me as a child, and now candy's not it for me. Now it's like cake, right? So the line moves a little bit where it's like not everything appeals, not every single thing sweet appeals to me now. Now it's like, okay, I don't even see that anymore. So we can use that example for spirituality, where spiritually we can train ourselves to see, to enjoy spirituality more like a tzaddik, and take less enjoyment and not not get appealed by some of the materialism that would have appealed us in the past through meditating again and again, seeing it, making an effort to see it that way, and eventually it becomes more habit for us. And then we move that line further and further and further. But that's not to say that the struggle isn't normal. You're just moving the line. It's just going to be different things that appeal to you now. So like I said, it's reaching for the unreachable. And it's really important to remember that, because we don't want to get discouraged, right? It's normal. I'm telling you something that we're going to learn in a future chapter because it's important, but struggle is actually a sign of life. It's a good sign for a Beinoni. For regular people, struggle is a good sign. It means you're doing something right. And we'll get into why that is, but it's like a sign of life, right? It's like no news is good news. Like, no, that's the opposite. It's like you're doing something right. You know what it's like? Bad publicity. It means you're doing something, right? Like, there's no publicity is bad publicity. How does it go?
Yeah. But why is trying to reach out to be more connected with your godly soul, why is it hard? Why didn't God make it easier? Or why isn't it easier, whether God made it or not? Why is it easier to give in to your animal desires? It's so much easier.
If you will try to meditate, you will see that it's not difficult at all. When you are with yourself, sorry, I have food in my mouth, but when you are with yourself, meditating, quiet in your mind, it is so easy.
It's not easy for me. Maybe I don't meditate enough.
It's so easy, and then you just realize how this world is so materialistic, so vain, and like nothing is important. Nothing is important.
Yeah. You're plugged into that. With that's the power of meditation.
Nothing is important. Like, the connection with God is everything. I do meditation every morning. I cannot do without it, and I can tell you it's changed my life completely.
And everyone who does practice that says exactly the same thing.
Look, in the beginning it's very difficult,
Yes.
because the more that you try to quiet your mind, the more thoughts will come. Like, you have to fight it. Just reach to the point that your mind is just so silent, and you're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel it to the point that it like you will feel so much unconditional love from God. Like, you can do anything you want in life. I don't know how to explain you until you will feel it yourself, but this is the most amazing feeling in the world.
Right, I guess my question is, why do we have to go through
Why
that?
meditation? Why does it take meditation?
What has happened to us?
We're coming from such a spiritual place that we are so connected with God, and when we come to this dimension, it's just so materialistic, and this is where we have to learn our lesson. So we have to learn how to balance it within ourselves. How, like the tzaddik, for example, that she was talking last week, we have like for me, how I see it, you have the tzaddik that is just born to this path, and you have the tzaddik that is just, he never reached to the outside world to really have the struggle that the Benoni go through, right?
Beautiful.
But we are so, like, for example, I will talk about myself. When I do meditation, I am so connected to God, to the universe, to whatever force you want to call it. Like, you feel where you come from, so much love, so much, everything good. Like, you are in such a good place, but when you reach outside and then you have somebody, like, traffic on the road, and you fight with, like, somebody want to try to cause an argument or anything, like, you've been, what's the word, like, you've been
Triggered.
triggered, like, you've been forced to be triggered with something, and that's when you see the trigger, that's what you have to work on, that's your tikkun.
So what Karen is asking is, why are there triggers, right? Is that
that's what we
or
have
why-
to work on.
Yeah, I guess,
so? That's the
yeah.
question. So your
Why don't we
question
live
is
in
more
a world-
existential.
Right, why don't we live in a world where everyone is keyed into?
Why don't we live in a messianic world?
Relevate
Right.
So our tradition,
Ah,
our tradition is that what is Messiah for us? It's not. It's really about what's happening inside of us, that we will be so plugged into the purpose and to spirituality. It will be so apparent that it won't be hard anymore, right? That's one day, right?
Mm.
But right now,
we don't live in
God
that world.
wanted it. No, God wanted it that we would struggle. But I want to ask you to.
That was very helpful, though. I love that. I love
It's
what you were
beautiful. It's a
saying,
beautiful
too.
that you get to
and
experience
I don't mean to argue
that.
with you. I'm just like, yeah, but that's not the world we live in. But you're saying.
But I want to
you
answer
can
your
create
question.
It, you
The
can
soul
create it
saying
within
word.
yourself.
So I want to answer your question with
Yeah.
a question.
Okay.
When you, I don't know what arena to use for you, but I'll use children. When you, or anything, when you achieve something that was easy for you versus something that you worked hard for, what gives you more satisfaction?
Right, the overcoming the challenge.
Right. So whatever it is for you, whether it's with music or whether it's with business or some, or another hobby you're working on, or something you're studying, the more you grapple with it, the more at the end when you reach an achievement, it feels so good.
Mm.
So I think that's where the answer lies. It's not that I have an answer, this is why, because at the end of the day, God created this system because this is how He wanted it. And when we want something, we don't really, if it's a true, deep, deep craving, we don't know why. It's just the way we want it. And also we talked about how God before is not really understandable, because there's no way that our limited minds can understand infinity. We cannot comprehend infinity. When I was a preteen, I once tried to, and I fully freaked myself out. Right, and I think it's important for kids to do that, actually, or people to do that, really. That's trying to understand God. That's what we're supposed to do. We're trying. So that's when if we were to understand why, we were to understand God. We were to be understanding God's ways, which aren't knowable. But at the same time, we are meant to try to understand it. So that's when I use the example of effort. When we put effort into something, we experience deeper satisfaction. And that's the way the world is rigged. This is the same reason why we struggle. So that when we achieve, it's something more special. It's a bigger deal versus the angels that live on high and they experience godliness because they have no really other choice to. They're just fully overwhelmed by the light of God. Great, good for them. But that's not what God wanted. God wanted souls and bodies to, from a space of not an obvious space. It's not an obvious thing that we would go and seek out spirituality, but when we do that, it's like, wow.
I have a question about the triggers. Does Judaism talk about, or how do they interpret the concept of compassion? Like, the reason that I got cut off in traffic is because that person has a need that's not being fulfilled. Having empathy for
Yes.
that person and what
Maybe it's protection. Maybe
That's there.
now you got delayed with traffic because you got saved from something else.
Or
No,
even if
I'm
it's less
asking
fear, but you're more
I'm
about the other
asking about
person.
the concept of
So actually,
because there's other traditions that teach that.
this is also in Judaism, and the idea is that to be angry is to kol hakohes kilu oved avodah zarah. Basically, when you get angry, fully angry, then you're basically saying that something happened to you that wasn't meant to happen, but it was meant to happen.
To
because,
your point.
Yeah, exactly, because God willed it to happen. So it's interesting. This is another contradiction in Judaism that there is your perspective and their perspective, and they're opposite. So from the perspective of the person it happened to, is their work is the acceptance. From the perspective of the perpetrator, their work is taking ownership and responsibility. And they're both correct. And the perfect example was actually brought in last week's chapter of Tanya in the text of the story of Joseph and his brothers. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. That's horrible betrayal. I mean, that's like next level. And what Joseph did was he forgave them. And what he told them when they were so sorry, from the brothers' perspective, they needed to deal with their mistake. They needed to properly take ownership and responsibility and repair. But from Joseph's perspective, he told them, I'm not upset at all. Hashem wanted me to be in Egypt. Hashem wanted me to go through that, and you were just the messenger. So it's that duality that's like contradictory, two truths existing at the same time. The truth that person shouldn't have done that, but that person was meant to receive that.
Yeah.
And it's actually in the chapter 2 about free choice. Well, we're going to go into a rabbit hole with that, but that's when we talk about our freedom of choice and our impulse control. Our tradition tells us that God plans everything. Another contradiction. God plans everything, but we have free choice. How we respond to what happens to us is our choice. Yeah.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah. Woo.
Yeah.
That was a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think all of the things that happen to us is just so that we can see what is inside of us, so that we can actually work on it. So from the perspective of, oh my gosh, I just got angry because of this, why am I getting angry? So, okay, this is an area now that I have to work on. So it makes it a little easier, like, to swallow, for me, coming in from that perspective versus, always just, versus being able to look at yourself and go, okay, this is something you want me to see and I couldn't see it before, and these are the circumstances that enabled me to see what's inside of me that needs to be worked on. Yeah.
That was beautiful. And also, it can come with so much compassion because when we get triggered, it's basic information for us. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's information for us. Like, okay, what is happening? Why did that bother me? And the Baal Shem Tov said a man is a mirror, which is, it's a hard pill to swallow sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I've learned you have to have compassion for yourself to understand the trigger.
That's where it comes that we're not a tzaddik. We're a Beinoni. It's normal. That was normal to bother me. I have an ego. It's alive and well. And that's how I was created. Right? And repair is also built in to the Tanya, to the Torah, to the Tanya. We have it's actually a mitzvah to do teshuvah. It's a mitzvah to repair. We're meant to make mistakes and repair them. And when we have the self-compassion, I think usually it leads us closer to repairing. Yeah, because what we're doing is we're accepting our imperfections.
And you're aware of that.
Yeah.
As well.
Versus being in denial, and denial doesn't help us grow.
Yeah.
So we're aware of our imperfections, of our, we're not a tzaddik, we're a Beinoni, and it's normal. Yeah.
I guess you have to have self-compassion and self-love in order to have it outside of you. Because if you will not love yourself enough, you will never be able to love anyone else in the best way possible. So it's very important first, even though if it sounds selfish, first of all, love yourself, have compassion with yourself, and always ask yourself when you get a trigger, what do I have to learn from it? not
Beautiful.
why is it happening to me? Don't be in a victimizing mentality. Always like, okay, this has happened, what do I have to learn? What do I have to fix? Whatever is a trigger, that's our lesson in life, that this is why we're here for, to work on and to move to the next step.
You reminded me of something that yesterday was the Pesach Sheni, the second Passover, and it's the idea of second chances. And the second chances idea isn't that you're going to get another chance to do that same thing. Like, I mean, second Passover is nice, you actually get a chance to eat the matzah. But in life, like I was talking to my kids, like you can't do fourth grade again, right? The mistakes you made in fourth grade doesn't mean you get to do more fourth grade again. But what you can do is make fifth grade. That's your chance to operate from the space that you wish you operated from in fourth grade during fifth grade, So that's what we're saying. We got triggered in the past, but we're not going to get stuck on the past. We're going to have compassion for the past and then just get focused on the present. What can I do now? What's in my control right now? Should we close our eyes and do some breathing? Yeah, let's breathe into this.
Oh, I don't want this class to finish.
Love you.
Feel like this.
So let's close our eyes. Take a deep breath in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Follow the natural rhythm of your breath. We're going to tune in to our two different identities. And as a Beinoni, we're going to give space for each of them to be. Invite yourself to feel what is driving you. It could be something that gives you joy and pleasure. It could be something you're excited for. It could be something you're working toward. Allow it to be and take up the space that it takes inside of you. And now I invite you to ask yourself, is there more? Do you have another drive deep inside of you that is pushing you, urging, what is it? What might it feel like to want to be close to God? The part of you that doesn't want to be separated from God, just wants to be right there. You might experience it like a flame reaching upward. You might experience it like a rope, connecting and tying you together with Hashem. And you're holding onto this rope and you want to be closer and closer, and you don't want to be disconnected. Imagine somebody came with, a big blade and was threatening to fray the rope or sever. Oh my God, imagine falling. Imagine that. No, I'm holding on. Holding on to a rope of connection with Hashem. Breathe into that connection. What does it feel like? And when you're holding on to that rope, what is less important to you? Who are you? You might feel part of you stirring. Tune into the feelings that your body is experiencing, that your soul is experiencing inside of your body. As you give voice to your soul. To your truth. Whenever you're ready, you can start imagining your soul inside of your body. You can start bringing sensation back into your extremities, your legs, your fingers, your toes. You can start to feel your soul embody the space of your physical body. Directing it, enlivening it with purpose. This process can take as long or as short as you would like it to. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and orient yourselves with your surroundings as a soul in a body. If you're able to stay, so the soul is given in the chapter 1, we read a bunch of verses and we ask questions about them, and the answers are right here, last week and this week. So there's this oath that a soul is told to promise before it's born. Will it be a tzaddik? To be a tzaddik and not a rasha. So it's a double oath. So the first question is, if it's making a promise to be a tzaddik, why does it also need to promise that it won't be a rasha? Isn't it obvious?
The distractions.
So the answer is that it needs to promise that it's going to strive towards that direction of tzaddik, even though it's kind of past the range, out of range. It's going to promise to try and get there anyways. But even if it doesn't get there, stay at Beinani, don't go to rasha. You need to be, from last week, you need to be like a rasha, which is a Beinani, see yourself like a Rasha, which is code word for Bainani. This is review for last week, but not an actual Rasha. Be a Bainani. Try to be a tzaddik, but at least be a Bainani. So that's the answer for the double oath. And to loop it back to answer your question, there are souls. The souls are the way they are. The question is, where do they go? Which bodies do they inhabit? I don't know that the bodies get to choose their souls. I do think that is a lot in life that is. But the choice that the soul, when the soul makes this oath, what they're doing is they're giving intention. They're setting a goal for themselves. So they're setting before a prenatal goal, so to direct the intention of their life. They're making a choice. Be like a tzaddik. Try to make it to tzaddik, even though it's not your natural ability. But also, don't be a rasha. So, strive for tzaddik, but commit to yourself Bainani. So they're not given the potential. They're not given the choice to have the tzaddik path or the Bainani path, like predisposition or propensity. That's decided for them. But we do get the choice to strive for tzaddik anyways, and we might even get there. So does that answer your question? Yeah. Cool. Thank you for actually asking it again, because it was part of the chapter. Yeah. But does anybody have anything to share? How did that feel?
Feel wonderful.
Very powerful.
Yeah, it was good. There was a lot of questioning going on in my mind.
Oh, just be curious about the questions.
Yeah, I'm very curious.
Yeah.
It was good. It was
Yeah.
nice to have the questions
Come up, and that's important. That's like information for us. Like, what is happening, right? Yeah. Feel free to ask the questions at any setting you'd like.
Figure out exactly
What they are, right? That's the first. But the first, when we quiet, like Leah talks about, when we quiet and we take a moment to focus, then the questions that come up is like they didn't have a chance to even voice themselves. So we give them a chance to voice themselves, and then we can work with them. Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you
so
so
much.
much. Yeah. Thank you.
I don't want to go.